Today we are joined by award-winning cybersecurity leader, author and speaker Jane Frankland, who's well known within the industry for her fantastic work for her passion to drive diversity, as I'm sure you all know, but her knowledge and experience spans across the entire field, from hands-on experience to strategy leadership. She joins us today to share her unbiased perspective on the current pros and cons of working with a boutique and big brand MDR providers. And alongside her, our very own Rob Demain, E2E founder and CEO and all-round cybersecurity defence expert. Rob has over 20 years experience in the field and over 10 of those with E2E Assure, and I'm sure most of you will agree with me, an excellent voice in calling out the FUD in the cybersecurity industry. To the conversation, Rob will be bringing the invaluable, truthful insider perspective from the provider to offer you the intel on the areas of the service that you actually need to be focusing on, such as the parts of the service that really matter and ones to avoid unnecessary upsell, things providers might not be wanting you to ask, as it might highlight gaps in their service, and tricks to keep up your sleeve to enable you to negotiate better contracts for yourself and your business. These are our wonderful faces. Hopefully we will be able to get their videos alongside our presentation as well. But that is it from me. Without further ado, I'd love to hand over to Jane and Rob and get this conversation started.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Emma. Apologies for not being able to see me. My camera actually is working, but for some reason it's not working here. But I am so happy to be talking to you today and to be doing this with Rob. So let's start off with why choosing the right MDR providers matters. And MDR is one of the most popular cybersecurity operations to outsource, especially amongst enterprise and mid-sized organizations. But with a wide range of providers in the market, many buyers are actually finding it hard to determine which provider is right for their organization and whether a boutique provider is a better fit than a big brand or vice versa. And this is absolutely understandable because MDR solutions are not a one-size-fits-all, and different providers offer varying levels of expertise, specialization, and service adaptability. However, engaging the wrong MDR provider can lead to costly mistakes and mismatches with specific security needs and operational technologies. And conversely, selecting the appropriate provider can result in better protection against cyber threats, reduce stress on the job, and importantly, the proof you need to show that you're making your company a harder target for an attacker. So if you're on the lookout for an MDR provider and are going to create a match made in heaven, I believe that there are three core considerations you need. And in a few minutes, I'm going to go through them with you. And after each consideration, I'm going to be discussing it with Rob. And you'll also have an opportunity to ask questions. You'll also have another opportunity to ask more questions right at the end too. And you can always put a question in the chat box, as Emma said a few minutes ago. But first of all, what I want to do is start with asking you a question. So please tell me, why are you attending this webinar today? Emma, can you pull up the poll, please? Is it to get general information gathering around MDR? Is it because you're looking to procure your first MDR service within the next 6 months? Is it because your current MDR contract is up for renewal in the next 6 months? Or is it something else? Amazing, thank you so much. Okay, so it takes considerable resources and experience to be able to provide a comprehensive MDR service. And one of the best ways to compare providers is by examining the ways in which they operate their tech. This is the first consideration. So what I want to do is look at this in more detail, starting with the most obvious: threat detection. Now, MDR providers play a critical role in minimizing the impact of cybersecurity threats. And they achieve this by rapidly identifying true threats, indicators of attack, and indicators of compromise hidden within their client systems, leveraging network segmentation and proactive strategies. And they know that for threat detection to be effective, their methods must include broad, deep threat intelligence and research, which encompasses open source intelligence, proprietary sources, and TTPs used by attackers. Now, Outsourcing these capabilities to an MDR provider significantly reduces the overhead and cost of accessing such tooling, making it a practical and cost-effective solution for organizations. Now, big brands and boutique providers differ in the way that they approach the threat detection. And big brands typically rely on limited telemetry and reactive investigation of automated alerts that come from default detection rule sets set by their preferred EDR and SIEM vendor partners. Whereas boutique providers usually take a more proactive, high-touch engagement stance. So recruited for their attacker mindset, they'll be conducting human-led, hypothesis-driven investigations, tailoring dark web monitoring to their client-specific needs, updating rule sets based on the threat landscape, and deconstructing zero-day malware. And by using the cyberkill and MITRE ATT&CK frameworks to update and fine-tune rule sets based on changes to the threat landscape, they'll also be simulating attacks to demonstrate their response capability. So when considering boutique and big brand providers, I want you to ask yourself, do you want tailored alerting? Do you want a more cost-effective option? Or do you want human-led investigations? And if you want, like, put your answers in the chat box, either like scribble down your notes or so that you have them and you can refer to them after this, or put them in the chat box. Okay, so let's look at incident response. When it comes to incident response, there is a big difference between boutique providers and big brands. And you'll find some providers simply offer alerts, reporting, and advice on what to do when an incident happens, while others offer more thorough assistance. So to get the most out of an MDR provider, your priority should be containment, malware removal, remediation, and root cause analysis, so that you can stop threats in their tracks, then followed by alerts and reporting metrics. Now, as boutique and big brand providers often outsource their incident response support to third parties, especially if they've just begun to offer the service, or as a way to lower overheads, I want you to watch out for this, as it can cause delays in response and remediation times, and that is certainly a stress that you could do without. So when considering boutique and big brand providers, I want you to ask yourself, do you want your MDR provider to have incident response in-house? Do you want to manage your incident response retainer? Do you want to prioritize speed and containment? Okay, so when we're looking at technical support, this is an important factor to consider when selecting your MDR provider. Boutique providers typically support an organization's existing technologies so that they can offer more personalized technical support services, which can be beneficial for organizations that need more guidance as they set up their systems and troubleshoot issues. They may also provide one-to-one consultations. In contrast, however, big brand providers tend to have more standardized technical support processes, which provide clients with the same level of service regardless of their individual needs. And they are often designed to fit around traditional managed security services, ticketed systems with a shared security model that requires their clients to manage and investigate the resulting alerts. However, they often offer FAQs, tutorials, and automated systems for onboarding and troubleshooting, which can be really helpful for clients who don't need a lot of handholding. So when you're looking at boutique and big brand providers, I want you to ask yourself, do you need your existing tech to be supported? Do you want one-to-one consultation support? Do you want to self-serve through FAQs and tutorials? Okay, so when we're looking at innovation and agility, when choosing an MDR provider, the ability to innovate and stay agile is crucial. So to ensure that detection mechanisms evolve with changing threats, you must ask yourself about their product roadmaps. Boutique providers with their smaller teams and vertical expertise are often more attentive to client needs and industry trends, enabling them to develop and implement innovative solutions faster. On the other hand, Big brands usually have more resources and established processes, making them sometimes slower to respond, but faster to scale. And with the ability to offer additional free resources, such as security assessments, analytics, data insights, research, and communities that can help their clients stay ahead of industry trends. Really useful. So when considering boutique and big brand providers, ask yourself, do you need agile defenses? Do you want innovation of existing services or access to new services? And do you need faster scalability? Now, when it comes to technology, the final consideration is the tech and MDR service, MDR provider users. Leading MDR providers, typically boutique firms, are tech agnostic, utilizing both their own tools and the native capabilities of different security tools to analyze data from all parts of an organization. This enables them to integrate with a variety of product vendors and offer a more customized multidisciplinary approach to MDR, which is highly agile, scalable, effective, and efficient. In contrast, however, big brands, aside from some of the largest tax, audit, and risk giants, tend to have more standardized tech solutions and are designed to provide clients with the same level of service, regardless of their individual needs. And these firms often offer a limited range of pre-integrated vendors, but numerous APIs, which is helpful if your organization doesn't need much customization. Some will also pin a vendor's flag to their mast, which means you'll need to buy additional licensing for the MDR service to work. And this may be wrapped up in the contract. And if it is, check it thoroughly, as it can cause problems when it comes to switching providers or termination, as I'm going to describe in a few minutes. So when considering boutique and big brand providers, ask yourself, do you want to continue using existing tech investments? Do you want a standardized service? And do you want the flexibility to change provider in the future? Okay, so just before I bring in Rob, I'm going to open up a poll to you. And I want those of you who are currently outsourcing a managed service to let me know what service you are outsourcing. Is it MDR, EDR, XDR, TDR, or MTDR, or SOC as a service? Just put your answers in the chat box. Or in the poll. Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for playing full out. I really, really appreciate it. Okay, so Rob, I'm going to bring you in now. In your experience as a managed service provider, what of these services provides the best holistic coverage for UK businesses today?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Jane. I think firstly, it's quite important to talk about kind of how confusing we make a lot of this terminology, isn't it? With MDR, EDR, XDR. So I think I'll start with that really, and sort of say that that the purpose of sort of managed detection response is to detect and respond to cyber attacks, usually around endpoints and identity. And then the wider service that normally wraps that up is SOC as a service. Which is probably doing a few more things than just detecting and responding to attacks on identity and endpoints and devices. And then we use the term threat detection response more keenly these days to try and differentiate, as MDR is often seen as something that just happens on an endpoint. So apologies for being part of this industry that makes life so confusing for everybody. But really, when we talk to customers, it's about starting with threat detection and response, which is really trying to prevent identity compromise, cloud compromise, endpoint compromise, and detect that as early as possible. And it might include an EDR typically. Does that make sense, Jane?
Yeah, absolutely. Let us know if it makes sense, in the chat box as well, because we're picking up any questions that you have, and we're here to serve you. It makes absolute sense, and it is really, really confusing. And I'm so glad you've just explained that. Yeah. Now, I've got a question for you on big brands. They obviously have more money to invest in new tech developments, and they're often dealing with large time and intensive projects due to their scale. So as a buyer, this absolutely looks good. But Rob, what disadvantages do you see?
Yeah, I think it's a sort of question of scale as well. So I think the larger you are, the more you want to standardize things like onboarding and things like the service delivery process, because that's quite important when you're operating at large scale. And you might typically want to work with a particular EDR vendor in that process. So there's actually quite a lot of inflexibility with that type of contract. You also might find that the service levels and the contracting piece, which I know we're going to discuss later, is quite inflexible because they really want to have standardized contracts, standardized services, standardized processes, because that fits a much bigger business model where you're looking to have hundreds and hundreds of clients.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. I mean, I certainly know from personal experience, having worked with big providers as one of them, and also at boutique providers, just what it's like, and with my company right now. When I was talking about big brands earlier and how many of them offer that end-to-end solution, I want to know from your perspective, what's the benefit of opting for a specialist boutique provider? And I appreciate that you are one, so it's probably going to be quite biased. But
Yeah,
can you explain? Yeah.
Yes, I mean we've 10 years, just over 10 years old, E2E, and we used to do quite a lot of things other than SOC as a service when we first started, but we decided to specialize exclusively in SOC and MDR and threat detection response, which is a lot of words describing a similar thing. And we just found that it's very difficult to specialize in one thing. But it's worthwhile because if you don't, then you find that ultimately all the resources are conflicted in some way. And ultimately, if you're trying to deliver lots of services, it's much more complicated. And to be good at doing one thing is easier than to be good at doing lots of things. We think that the sort of the detection response space really is a complicated space where you need dedicated organizations that don't do anything else and they just focus on being the best at that. So that's why we decided to go that route and not provide other services. And it also means that customers can basically choose the technology they want and we'll work with them generally versus us imposing some type of technology on them, such as an EDR. So I think that's why we decided to focus in that direction. And the kind of negative to it is that we're not the one-stop shop, so you can't get your pen testing from us and things like that. We think that's actually quite beneficial in a way because otherwise you're kind of marking your own homework if we're kind of doing all things at once. I think that's a key differentiator. Is the organization you're speaking with actually a specialist in this? Do they live and die this, or is it just something they've bolted on to something else they do? Because I think bolting this type of thing on, a lot of MSPs do that. They go, we'll just shove the SOC towards the help desk and that'll be okay. And it's not. They won't survive the first ransomware attack because it is a specialist service that needs specialist people and years of experience in planning and testing.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. It's definitely, I mean, like from having owned, with my pen testing company, a specialist boutique firm, I totally get what you're saying. But it really comes down to, many of those questions that I asked earlier, when you're going through them, exactly what's going to fit your organization. And certainly when we move on to the other two considerations, which I'm going to come on to in a minute, you'll get a complete picture as to what suits your business. So on that note, I'm going to move over to contract terms, which is the second core consideration, the contract. So a contract outlines the terms, conditions, and legal aspects of the relationship between the MDR provider and the client. And it typically covers various aspects, including the service level agreement, scope of work, payment terms, and legal responsibilities. Now, when it comes to procuring the MDR service, one of the key areas of frustration, and I know you've done a lot of research on this, Rob, is contract terms. And for decades, buyers have had no choice but to suffer lengthy fixed contracts from their third-party providers, particularly when it comes to big brands. And while these contracts can offer some cost predictability, which is always a good thing, they can also limit flexibility over the contract term and the effectiveness of the cybersecurity measures being implemented. For example, when you have rigid contract terms and a client's requirements surpasses the initial statement of work, here you're going to find that when new security options are needed to be added, then you're going to end up with expensive and inefficient onboarding processes, which harms your agility. So looking at boutique providers, they tend to have more flexible contract terms that are tailored to fit the specific needs of their clients. And they put client satisfaction at the heart of what they do, which leads to stronger long-term relationships. For example, some offer those fixed term contracts with a break clause, which can be really useful, which allows their clients to terminate their services if they don't get value within a specified period of time, usually around 6 months. And others sometimes can offer more flexible monthly subscription models, which I really like, which their clients can cancel at any time without a penalty. And this is really beneficial for smaller organizations with limited budgets who want a more customized solution, or to test the waters and see a return on investment without making a long-term commitment. So when you're considering boutique and big brand providers, I want you to ask yourself, do you want flexible terms, for example, monthly contracts? Do you want to have customer satisfaction at the center of your service? And would you like an easy way to break down costs? Okay, so when it comes to comparing SLAs offered by boutique and big brand providers, several key differences emerge. Boutique providers typically present a proactive, client-focused approach, offering personalized attention tailored to their clients' individual needs, and a flexible approach that can be customized and adapted to evolving client requirements. In contrast, however, big brand providers benefit from strong brand recognition and established market positions, and they can also often leverage economies of scale and invest in advanced tech and infrastructure, resulting in robust capabilities and broader SLA offerings. So when considering boutique and big brand providers, I want you to ask yourself, would you like tailored SLAs to your specific organization? And do you have specific SLAs in mind for your provider? Now, when it comes to pricing and securing a good deal, you may find you have more leeway with a boutique provider. I'm smiling there. Most are focused on growing revenue and gaining recognizable brand logos, unlike big brand providers where the attention is on EBITDA margins, client stickability, and satisfying investors with high growth and monthly recurring revenues. So when you're considering what type of provider to go with, boutique or big brand, I want you to ask yourself, would you like more leeway in terms of your pricing? Would you like to purchase your own product licenses? And I've got a question for you now. So just before I bring in Rob, how important do you consider contractual flexibility to be, Rob? Do you think it's very, sorry, my audience, do you think it's really important? Is it a non-negotiable? Is it important? This would be ideal, but it's hard to get. Is it indifferent? You've never considered it as an option, or is it just not important to you? Okay, so Rob, we have discussed contractual flexibility quite a lot within this section. How important do you see this feature in the fight against cybercrime this coming year?
It's hugely important and often really overlooked. And I speak to a lot of CISOs and head of cybersecurity, and the worst case is you're stuck in a contract that's inflexible for a period of time, and things are changing in your organization. You've just bought a new EDR, you've just started to enable a new digital transformation project that starts to use a lot of cloud services, and then you contact your SOC provider and they're saying, oh, that's not in the scope that you signed 4 years ago. Therefore, it's a change note, and that'll cost you lots more money and lots more aggro. And of course, that's when you're contracting on a contract, and that's the focus of what you're doing. And that doesn't help your cybersecurity at all, because it's going to delay and cost you more to protect the things that you've that you want to protect. The typical time this happens is you have a SOC service with a long-term contract that was negotiated because 5 years was cheaper than 1 year rolling, and that seemed like a good idea. But actually, in the years since you took it on, so much has changed in your organisation that's simply not reflected anymore in the contract. And the classic is that the current contract is very much more a detect contract, so it's looking at logs and sending alerts to the client, but it doesn't include any response at all. And you might then go and enable an EDR or deploy an EDR and find that your existing SOC contract won't accommodate that. So then you might go and procure a separate MDR service for that EDR alongside your SOC service because you can't work it out with your SOC provider. And it's also not very focused on the outcome. So what we try and do with this is to focus on outcomes that make the client more secure, but preferable for both parties. So that means that if you're doing something that increases your cybersecurity, then your contract should say that's great, we'll accommodate that and work with it, as opposed to making it difficult to do that, thereby not improving your cybersecurity.
I think with such speed of change, such changing times, you've got to have that. You're foolish not to, because things are changing so fast. It's almost like every single year we're seeing new tech evolve, we're seeing new types of attacks evolve. So you've got to be able to have that. And I think the other thing that's also kind of, as I'm listening to you talk, thinking about is other people coming into your organization. We know that CISOs might not be staying at that organizations for that long. It might not be 4 or 5 years or 10 years. There's a movement going on there too. So when you actually have the flexible contracts, whoever is coming into your organization and maybe taking over from you has that luxury too. So you're getting a secure organization because you can respond faster to evolving threats, and you're also making it easier for anyone coming into your organization and picking up your work.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And another key consideration is how is the technology for that MDR service provided? I know you made the point around owning it yourself. We see a lot of clients choosing to do that. So you've got to think about, if you want to change provider at some point, how difficult and expensive is that going to be? Either it's the end of the contract, or the worst case, you've got to get out of the contract mid-term in some way and bring in somebody else. So clearly, if your organization owns and controls the licenses and the configuration, that is a good place to be if you want to change provider. If your MDR provider is providing the tech, the EDR, managing it, and the license, then you're probably going to have a more difficult time moving to another one. So the recommendation we always have is that ideally our clients purchase their own licenses for their own technology, and that gives them control over that piece. And then they can chop and change their service provider who looks at that technology and works with them. And if you do that, you shouldn't be afraid to change provider, and because you control the key bits that make the service work.
Absolutely, those are really great points. I'm really glad you made them. Are there any other key SLA agreements to look out for when you're actually negotiating the contract terms? Yeah,
there's a ton of weeds here around things like, do they actually respond? Is it detection, and is it an alert relaying service? So is the service basically looking at an alert from something and then sending you a message to say, we've seen this alert, do something about it? Or is the service actually going to do something about that alert itself? So first, how in deep is the triage that the service will do on the alert? And secondly, if the alert is of a certain criticality, will they take action to disrupt an attack? Will they disable user accounts? Will they reset tokens? Will they contain files? Will they quarantine devices and isolate devices? Or will they push that back to you? So that's a key one, is understanding the depth of what they're going to do. And on the worst case, it's they're simply going to relay alerts back at your team, just basically passing alerts to you. In the best case, they're going to analyze those alerts, triage them, and only do something if they think it's important, but do that proactively and let you know what's happened. And the key thing about making that process work is collaborating with you to build those processes together, rather than just using standard out-of-the-box responses. because often your team wants to be involved at different levels of a triage, and that can depend on what your preferences are. And I think another big area where people get caught out is simple things like criticality, severity of alerts and severity of incidents, how they're classified. For example, you might find a lot of providers don't look at messages that are up below a certain criticality by default. So if the EDR is sending them lots of information messages or low or mediums, they may not include those in their SLA, for example. They may not even look at them. Whereas that can be the key indicator that you need to detect and respond to an attack early. So there's a lot of weeds here, unfortunately.
Yeah. And having a clear service definition of what actions your provider is expected to take, or actually is absolutely key, you know, because there's an awful lot of considerations just in what you've said there.
Yeah.
The other thing I'm thinking as well is just the amount of alert fatigue that is going on. So it's really important to make sure that you're not making the team's work harder, you know, because too many alerts are coming through and they just can't deal with them. I did some research the other week and read up that teams were unable to deal currently with 67% of alerts received, and that 83% are false positives.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's way higher. If you're looking at info and above type alerts, then you're in the 99% false positive league. And what your SOC provider or your MDR provider should be doing is dealing with all of that without you being involved at all. They should be taking weight off your shoulders, not adding problems. So really, you've got to get to the point where you're confident they're doing the right triage, the right processes are being followed, they're investigating things in the way that you agree is the right way for your organization, and they're only raising things when they meet the criteria that you agree is what it should be. And I think that's the key to getting it right. And it's not a sort of fit and forget process. You know, you have to sort of learn as you go along with clients. One side, it's them learning more about the capability of the service, and the other end, it's you trying to learn more about how to work better with the existing team. And that's how you develop a successful relationship with an outsourcer in this business.
That's really, really, really great points. What about one kind of final question for you here on contract terms? A lot of big brand providers in the UK are American-based and founded. And from your experience, do you feel that there are any benefits for UK businesses partnering with a UK-based managed service provider?
I mean, I would do it because we're UK based, but you know, put my sort of hats on the shelf with that respect. Then I think we're seeing that increasingly more and more. We might go head to head with 2 or 3 American providers, and that is a factor. If we can provide UK based T's and C's, UK based SOC, they can come and visit and meet the people, and not see it as some sort of big commercial remote sort of offshore operation. So I think there's a few things in that, like we encourage all of our customers to come to our SOC and see the people behind it, because that builds sort of confidence and relationships. And I think there's a danger that we step away from that as we automate and use more AI, which we all are inevitably doing, that we sort of we go too far into that automated world and don't engage properly with the individuals who are using the service at the customer end. So I think that's why, if you sort of, you know, you there's nothing better than going to your provider's SOC and meeting the team is our view. And that's obviously works well for UK-based companies and UK-based SOC providers. And there clearly may be some contractual bits that don't fit, particularly with privacy and data sharing requirements and things like that come into contracts. And I guess that's where boutiques have probably got the more leeway in that contract as well, to understand if you've got any particular requirements that we need to adjust, and we can negotiate. So you'll often find that there is a contractual negotiation as part of a procurement. I think that's what boutiques do quite well, is that they're quite sensible with understanding what is and isn't important to them in a contract, and which bits can be negotiated and which bits can't. And I think finally, Jane, there is a consideration these days about where data is held by the service. So inevitably the service will take data and store it somewhere. And that, you know, is very handy for a lot of organisations if that is in the UK. And if it's not in the UK, then it may present issues depending on the type of data service collects.
Absolutely. Have we got any questions from the audience here? I'm just kind of checking in with you to make sure before we go on to the final consideration. Okay, so let me move on to the final consideration. This is diversity. Now, I'm sure you're not surprised by me saying that. Having a diverse MDR team is absolutely key to providing best of breed threat detection and response services. And the reason why is because it reduces the likelihood of groupthink by bringing together individuals with different genders, ages, backgrounds, cultures, experiences, and perspectives to generate new ideas and innovative solutions. So having team members who can understand their clients' needs on a deeper level always makes for a successful partnership. And whilst diversity covers a wide range of dimensions, there are three that I believe are particularly crucial. And the first is gender. And although there are numerous genders, and of course you can be between a gender, the strengths women bring to an MDR provider as analysts and threat hunters are unique. According to research, women tend to be more detail-orientated, thorough, collaborative, and communicative in their approach than their male counterparts, all of which are key elements in successfully tackling threats. And research also tells us that having more women in a group raises the group's collective intelligence. Therefore, if there are more women threat hunters in an MDR team, the team is working collaboratively, so therefore it will undoubtedly improve the quality of the output. Now, it's not that women are better than men, it just means that when we come together, we do better. Same for ethnic diversity. It offers numerous benefits that contribute to more effective threat detection and response strategies. For example, firstly, it ensures a broader range of perspectives, cultural experiences, and problem-solving approaches, allowing the team to better understand and anticipate threats targeting specific communities or regions. And this is essential in combating cybercriminals who exploit cultural nuances and language tailored to target specific ethnic groups. Additionally, ethnic diversity fosters creativity and innovation as different cultural perspectives lead to fresh ideas and alternative solutions when tackling cybersecurity challenges. So a diverse team helps build stronger relationships with clients from different backgrounds as well. It fosters better communication and collaboration, and it also enables that cognitive flexibility and critical thinking to occur. Likewise, when we come to neurodiversity within an MDR, there are lots of advantages too. Neurodiverse individuals bring unique cognitive profiles, offering different perspectives and valuable skills that enhance problem-solving capabilities. Their exceptional analytical skills and thinking patterns enable them to identify patterns and detect anomalies others might miss, crucial in threat hunting and incident response. And the diverse range of cognitive strengths, such as memory and logical reasoning abilities, can be channeled into tasks like malware analysis and vulnerability assessments. So neurodiverse team members can really help you to elevate creativity and innovation within the team. Again, fostering the development of novel approaches and solutions to complex challenges through that diverse thinking style and an inclusive environment. So when you are selecting your MDR provider, whether it's boutique or big brand, really take the time to research the team. Check out its website and social media profiles for details on its employee backgrounds, experience, and capabilities. And ask about any diversity initiatives that they have in place, whether they're members of any diversity initiatives as well, because that's going to really help to ensure that you're confident in the MDR provider and that they're really serious about diversity and have an inclusive culture. Big brand providers typically have an advantage over boutique providers here because they have greater economies of scale, which can often enable them to invest in internal diversity networks and employ a larger, more diverse workforce. However, this doesn't always mean that boutique providers lack diversity, as often they hire people from different industries, backgrounds, or who are neurodiverse, and they can often have less rigid and a more personalized experience, which appeals to these minority groups. So think about that side of things. And when you're considering that, I want you to ask yourself whether working with a provider that prioritizes diversity, whether that's important to you, and also whether your existing internal team would benefit from the collaboration of a diverse team. So, question for you now, do you feel that your business prioritizes diversity rather enough in the cyber workforce? Is it yes, it's a strong consideration when hiring, sort of, it is considered, but we have other needs to prioritize, or no, our business does not prioritize diversity when hiring our cyber team? Let me know in the poll. Rob, do you feel that as an industry we're doing enough to encourage diversity in the workplace?
I think it's a challenge. It really is a challenge, and I know that you know, one of the reasons why that Jane, you help us out with webinars like this is because you understand our shared passion in this area. Something we've been involved in many years is particularly neurodiversity. Actively recruiting people into the industry, training them, and actually giving them jobs is hugely important. And the reason why we started doing it is to build a better team. So if you think that the business is one big team delivering one service, the best outcome for a team is to have a diverse team that don't all think the same. Because someone once said to me, you know, how can you solve complex problems if you all think the same? And the SOC is there to solve complex problems. That's its job, and operate in a diverse team. So we found out many years ago that understanding neurodiversity in particular was key to success in what we did, because we needed, you know, the business wanted the different skills that diversity brought to it. That was a selfish need. And that's how we got into it, wanting to get the right talent and the right thinking process into our business and the right skill sets. And then obviously over the years, it's evolved into more of, you know, more of a strategic goal for businesses is to be more diverse. And I think that makes a lot of sense. It's very difficult though to actually achieve a lot of diversity in cybersecurity without making it your priority. So, you know, just doing some sponsorship or some work placements or whatever you're doing is not going to cut it. You've got to kind of really invest in it over the long term. And a lot of the time you might fail as well at this because your organization simply can't adapt in the way it needs to adapt to recruit people. And that's a challenge that we've had, definitely. And there's a lot to this area, Jane. I think we could have a separate webinar about. But I would say if you want an effective team solving a complex problem, diversity is essential, and we recognise that in our business. And it's worth, if that's important to you, it's worth scratching into the hood with the people you're speaking to and the businesses you're doing business with, because what can happen, and what we were very guilty of originally, was trying to standardise everything, in almost including our recruitment process, which ended up with the same type of people looking at the same problem in the same way. And that's not very agile, not very flexible, doesn't really progress things forward. It just kind of ends up with a lot of traditional processes being reused and then supported by people who also thinking that that's the right way to do things. So I think, you know, with MDR businesses, agility and keeping pace with the threats and all those things, you need a team that's diverse and agile and thinking differently. And that's a key strength that we believe in our business.
I love how honest you've been with that, because it's not easy at all. You know, I've seen small companies, boutique providers, and also big brands, you know, try to do this, and it's tough. You know, especially when you're looking at full diversity. Sometimes I found that big brands have more knowledge, but equally they can be quite fixed. You know, when it comes to adapting. So it's just like, it can be a case of, these are our hiring processes and we cannot change them, even though we might want to, and we see the benefits of that and totally get what this is all about. We're this huge multi-million billion company, and there's nothing that we can do, and that's really frustrating for them. And that's where boutique firms can, you know, sometimes they don't have the knowledge and they don't have the desire, but sometimes they do, and so therefore, if they do, they can be agile, just as you've said, and take that engineering mindset to it. It's just like, okay, well, you know, from all the information that we've consumed or maybe worked with partners to do a better job, you know, we believe these things are going to work, and then implementing them and then testing them and retesting and adapting. So having that engineer's mindset, I think, is really important. But yeah, really well done on your efforts. I've been really impressed with what I've seen, you know, on those. So I'm going to come to the audience now, and Emma, have we got any questions that need asking?
I've just been double checking the chat now. Unfortunately, in my view, I can't see the Q&A box, so I will ask upon lovely Holly to do a double check there for me.
Yeah.
But I can't see anything at the moment right now, but I know
I
we
can
do
see
have
some, Emma, if you want to go through them.
I was going to say there are a couple there for you, Rob.
Beautiful. Please do. Please carry on.
Yeah.
We've got a question from Dave Byrne around false positives in practice without customer context. And then the answer is, Dave's talked about AWS Guard Duty, which, for those that don't know, is an AWS security solution that monitors AWS logs and generates findings and alerts. And often a lot of SOC providers would have to ask the customer a question about that alert to resolve it. And I'm not saying that it's possible to do it without doing that. So I guess the answer to you, Dave, is that we need a certain amount of collaboration to successfully resolve incidents. And that's kind of the point in why we specialize in it. So rather than kind of standardize and select only a set of AWS Guard Duty alerts that we'll work with, what we really want to do is try and understand which ones are important with you proactively when we onboard the service, and how we should react to those things, because there isn't actually that many different types of alert. And if we can agree with you as part of onboarding what's important, how we should respond to that, what isn't important, but also what would make something that's not important, we can then go and make sure that we're collecting the surrounding logs that can help give us context to answer the question more effectively. So you picked a really good example there with Guard Duty, which is very, very good at sending you messages that are very hard to resolve. And I guess that's why collaboration is key, and standardization is probably quite frustrating. Does that answer your question, Dave?
It's a great question.
Yeah, so obviously got a bit of experience with this SOC there, Dave. Another one from, is it Andrew?
Andrew Davison, yeah. What metrics?
Yeah, so there's a number of metrics you want to look at. Obviously, there's an SLA, which will have mean time to detect, but it should also have mean time to respond. So that's your kind of high level metric, is what are they actually doing? Are they just alert relaying, or are they actually responding? So when I mean time to respond, it's how long would it take to identify a threat? Take two examples only, make it simple. If we suspect an identity has been compromised via an adversary in the middle attack and the tokens have been stolen, how long would it take for that to be investigated, triaged, and then the user disabled and the tokens reset? That's the timeline you should be looking at, and we call that attack disruption. What is the timeline it takes the SOC to process the alerts, realize it's something that needs action, and then take action on your behalf? So that's a key one. And then the other metrics they should be doing is, what you should be asking for is, how are you making us more secure? How can you demonstrate that by buying this service, we are now a harder target to cyber criminals, or whatever your cyber threats are? But if you base this around ransomware as a good point to start, you need to make sure that you can get metrics from your provider that say, we've now made you a harder target against ransomware or identity theft or business email compromise. And they should be able to demonstrate how they've done that, both proactively in terms of working with you to make you a harder target. So that's things like in Microsoft environments, working with you to improve your Microsoft Secure score, to make sure you've done the necessary bits that make you a harder target. It might be reviewing the configuration of the EDR with you, to make the EDR more performant, work better, and have a wider use case that it reacts to. And it should also be working out how it can test or make sure that it can prove that it does what it's saying. So this metric is often never included. We don't see it hardly at all, which is how do you prove the service is working? So that's a really important one, because if you don't test the SOC service, how do you know it's actually working? And how do you know it's addressing the threats that you're worried about? So we have an aspect of our service which is testing, or you can call it simulations, but understanding how they're going to test and simulate the service and make sure it's working as expected is another key metric that I'd advise you ask for, Andrew.
Have we got any more questions? You can put them in the Q&A box or in the chat box. We're going to be looking out for them. No more questions from you. Emma, I'm going to hand over to you now.
Of course, thank you very much. And I just want to say thank you very much to everybody who has attended today's session as well. I hope you guys have found it valuable. I know I always really enjoy listening to both Jane and Rob speak. There is always a lot of insight to be gathering from the information that they're sharing with us. Again, a final thank you to everybody who attended. I hope you all have a wonderful Wednesday, and hopefully we will see you again in the near future. And thank you again to both Jane and Rob for your time.